Hey, kia ora, Helen from Second View Live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. My day has been awesome. So much happening. So last night's call has generated a lot of comments. So I've been getting private messages today regarding last night's call about the blood work. If you go back to last night's video, hang on. First of all, welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1441. Genealogy, learning new things. Okay, so back to last night's course. So if you go to day 1440, where we had Nicole on, she was talking about her workshop, which is coming up on the 18th. Yes, the 18th of July. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And there was a link that was scrolling across the bottom of the thing. If you go into the description for that video, you can find it on YouTube, on my Facebook page, or on my Cruise Planners Have to Cruise page. In the description there is the link to register for that workshop. And it sounds like there's a lot of people that are interested. So I'm super excited for her, because this is, if you watched us do food labels last month, you know how passionate she is about food labels. She has that same passion when it comes to blood work and figuring out, putting the pieces of, as she said, putting the pieces of the puzzle together and figuring out what makes our bodies tick, is what's happening in our body. And she really wants to pass a portion of that knowledge along to you. So please go to the video for last night at episode 1440. And the link is in the description. Click on that, register for a class. It's free. It's free. It's about an hour. I think it's going for about an hour. So yes. And if you can't make it, register anyway, because I think she's sending out the copy of the recording to those that are registered. So even if you can't make it, go register, because it's going to be a very, very fun class. I can't wait. Although I'm actually working at that time, so I'm probably going to have to wait for the recording to come out. So anyway, what else is happening? So Amazon had their Prime Sales Day yesterday and today. I got the best deal ever. I have to tell you about this. So I'm sitting here at a fold-up table as my desk. It's a 6-foot long table, and it folds in half, so it makes it easier to carry. But it's got a little bit of scratches and all that on that keep catching my t-shirts on. But these are really, really good, sturdy tables. They happen to have them on sale for Prime Days at over 60% off. So I got 2 for less than the price of 1. I thought that was a super deal, because I needed, and these are always handy to have. Like this one will probably go back to the, actually, no, I found another use for this one. So they're going to go, one's going to go into my craft room. I'm going to keep one as a desk, and I'm going to put a new one here as a desk, so I don't have this stuff here catching my t-shirts and things. This one will probably go into the craft room where it's turned up against the wall. And the other new one will actually go into my breakfast nook dining area for now, with the intent of it, once I get a table in there, to go into the craft room. And I keep going into my craft room, and which I'm currently using as a study room to finish my genealogy diploma that I am doing through the Center of Excellence, which is based in the UK. But I keep, every time I go in that room, I'm like rearranging everything in the room. Right now it's got this a fold-up table that's smaller than this one, with just my laptop on there. It doesn't have my textbook right now because it's right here in front of me. But it has my notebook, and it has my pen holder, and a place for me to put my water bottle when I'm there. And that's all, and a chair, and that's all it has in the room. So every time I go in there, I'm like thinking, oh, well, if I put a table here and I put one over here, just trying to reconfigure the room and stuff. And I'm like, the table I'm using as a study table will end up being used in the craft room. But I thought, well, if I'm getting 2 tables the same, this was my thought today. If I get 2 tables that are the same, I could put them together in the middle of the room, and there's my big work surface. Because if I'm cutting material to do some sewing projects and things, I'm going to want a big workspace. And this will give me, let's see, these tables are 72 inches by 30, about 29, 30 across. So that'll give me around 58 to 60 inches wide and 6 foot long. I thought that would work perfectly. And there's enough space in the room that I can do that. So that's been my latest thought. Although I may put one end of the table up against the wall, but just have this big like island that sticks out where the two tables are together. I don't know. I'm still playing around with ideas because I'm not ready to tackle my craft room yet. I got to get this done first. This is done through Center of Excellence, and I'm motoring through it right now. I have to get it finished before July 22nd, because July 22nd I start my week-long conference / class through the International Genealogy Historical Research Center, which puts on this week-long class. You go in there, you choose which track you want to take, and you're in that track for the entire week. And you come together for lunches, you come together for breaks. They even have a thing where you've got to go and try and, how many relatives can you connect with at the conference. And this is part of the family search thing. They have this tool there where you can put your name in, and you can sign up for the group for the event, and you can see how many people are you related, and we all guys go related to, and we send emails to each other going, hey, supposedly we are related in this capacity, with 13th cousins 4 times removed or something like that. But you got to see how many people can you connect with during the conference, and they have prizes at the end. And one of the girls that I met at the first one 3 years ago ended up winning last year, and she was super happy because she ended up with a scholarship for this year, which was a great prize to get, and she was a machine. So the one coming up has different classes based on different topics. I'm doing the 3rd year of the methods of research and stuff. So I started off with the beginners, did the intermediate last year, and this year I'm doing the advanced. And my instructor is a really cool lady. She's called the legal genealogist, and she's actually a lawyer. And I tell you, I have watched I've watched several of her presentations, and she is hilarious. But I learned so much with her. So I was excited to see that she's going to be my main instructor during this week-long class that starts on July 22nd. So with this genealogy diploma, I'm trying to get it finished before we start that. And so module 1 I'd already had completed, and I just had the assessment to do on that one. So I did that on my first hour because I've been putting it off for a while. So I made the commitment I was going to get it done. And so on Sunday, I had 2 1-hour sessions that I broke up into study time, and and did a refresher on the first module, and then submitted and even though in this book, it takes you through and has the answers and the questions in the book for the assessment. But this book, I noticed, was dated 2016. So they have since updated some of the questions and how they are answered. Because when I get to the assessment at the back, I'm like, oh, crap, I've got to write out a pedigree chart for 3 to 5 generations. I then have to write out a family group sheet and show all my sources and everything else. I'm like, okay. So I printed off pages yesterday for my group sheets. I printed off my pedigree charts, and you couldn't print it off from a software program. It had to be handwritten. Like, oh, geez, this is going to take me forever. And I'm like thinking, okay, we got to work on this some way. And so then something made me go in and have a look, because I'd read all the material, and I got to the end where I had to do the assessment. And I'm like looking at the assessment in the book going, yeah, that's going to take me a while. But something made me go and check it. So I went and checked it, and it was all multi-answer questions. I was like, oh, I don't have to handwrite everything out. Yes. So that's how it's been. So since the first module was you had to fill in things, and then they had to mark it because it was free-form answers. And then I got module 2 done, and the assessment for that. No, hang on. I got the module 2 completed, ready for the assessment the next day. And then on Monday, I had an hour session where I got assessment 2 submitted and came back with 100% on that. Did module 3 and its assessment, did module 4 and its assessment, and got 100% on the first 4 modules. And I've already done module 5 today, and I put the assessment, and as soon as I hit that submit button, I thought, I got that question wrong. I knew exactly which question it was. I thought, They tricked me. I got that question wrong. I didn't pause and take note and read the question thoroughly enough. And I knew exactly what, and so I got a 90% on that one. So I've got the first 5 modules done. I'm trying to get as many as I can get done before the weekend, because then the rest of the week is going to be getting the rest of them completed. So 5 out of 11 modules have been completed. And it's interesting because this is all done from the British perspective. When you're researching in the UK, which is where I spend a lot of time for my family tree researching. Yes, I've done a whole bunch in New Zealand, but my ancestors came from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and Cornwall. For some, don't ask me why, but when you do your DNA results and all of that sort of stuff, it will show you how much English you have in you, how much Scottish you have in you, how much Irish you got in, and how much Cornish you have in you. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? So it actually targets a specific area in England to say that you came from there. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I've got English, Cornish, Scottish, Irish, and that's just that part. I also have Danish, Swedish. I did have Norwegian for a bit, but that got removed in the latest updates. That may come back again, because Scotland was, a lot of it was colonized by the Norwegian Vikings. And there's been rumors in my family that we are related to the Vikings in some way, but that's on my dad's side of the family. My heavy Scottish side of the family comes from my mother's side. So it's very interesting how this all comes out. But things like learning, where did your surname come from? Where did your last name or your surname or your family name, whichever you want to call it, where did that come from? And they say that the most 5 common origins of a surname are location. So if you think of somebody who has a last name Hill, they obviously live near a hill. River. Just thinking of some names off the top of my head. A profession, a blacksmith, a goldsmith. What else did we have? A description. So it could even be like, where is it? They even gave me some ones here to write down. Oh, this was eating. My maiden name is Ekins, Ekins. In the Anglo-Saxon time period, it was actually written as EDE-KIN, and it meant son of Edward. So there's a family connection. You are the son. If you have Williamson, you are the son of William, is the last name. They had different ones there, like Singh, which is from India, meant lion. So obviously they lived in an area that was close to a lot of lions. And it was just interesting to see that, based on descriptive, they said Robin Hood was named because he wore a hood to disguise himself while he was living as an outlaw. So they knew his first name was Robin, so they put the hood on the end because he kept wearing this hood. Little John was apparently a big man, and so they switched it around. Blackbeard in the Pirates because he had the black beard, and he also had. Do you know he used to set his beard on fire? I'm reading The Republic of Pirates, and there's all these different stories in there of pirates and things. I'm totally digressing here. But with our pirate cruise coming up in December of next year, it's relevant. So Blackbeard used to frighten people. He used to set his beard on fire when they were attacking other ships. Isn't that interesting? So if you have somebody like Peterson or Williamson, they're the son of Peter or the son of William. And this one I found interesting. So there's a lot of different things that come in there, They said, they've even got one here that says Adam, who was the son of the local blacksmith, could easily be known as Adam Smithson. So the son of the smith, named Adam. He was named Adam, and he was the son of the smith. So there's different variations and different things based on where people come from. And even if it is in another language, you can go in and find out what the translation of that language is. Like Chan, C-H-A-N, is Chinese for snow. I thought that was pretty cool too. So we're having to find out all about this. And and when you're doing genealogy in England, they have things like where they put, if you don't know the mother's maiden name, in the last name or the surname or the family name, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. We're calling it the surname. In the surname field, you would put parentheses and then the husband's name in there. So if you had somebody who was married to a Williamson, you'd put Williamson inside the parentheses to know that it was his wife Susan, but we don't know her last name. But we know that she was married to this guy Williamson. So you can help connect them that way. I have a lot that have parentheses with Eakins in them. Yes, and trying to figure out which one's which. And there's a lot of Elizabeth parentheses Eakins in there. I'm just like, yeah. And when you're looking up records and going back in time, if you see a maiden name that's the same as the husband's married name, just be cautious with those ones, because it could be her married name, or it could very well be her maiden name, where she is from a different branch of that family, or she is from a completely separate branch of the family. Because there were times when you married cousins who would be from the same family and they had the same last name, or there could be ones where people got married and they were no relation whatsoever, like completely. If they went back far enough, they may have found a relationship there, but basically they didn't have one. So what was interesting is that throughout the United Kingdom, much of Europe, surnames started to become hereditary in the 1200s. Because I was like, how long has this been going on? And almost everyone had one by the 1500s. And this was due to registering people with government records and that sort of stuff. But the nobility and the upper class had their surnames, so people could say, oh, well, I am related to. So you could get that connection in there. So therefore you were given some of the benefits and privileges of being related to that particular person, and they did it through the last name, through the surnames. The Roman surname started somewhere around the 7th century BC, but probably earlier, and the Chinese surnames were before the 5th century BC. So it was kind of interesting when the different ones come in, and heraldry was a huge thing. Then we went into recording your sources, and I was like, yeah. This is the one I always have fun with, because I hate doing it, but I know I have to. When you're citing a source, you need to put it there so, one, you can get back to it, and number two, if anybody comes behind you or is reading a paper that you've written and you've got to put all the sources in there, that they can go and look up those sources and find the same information that you found. So those are the two reasons why it is important to have your sources there. And they had this really cool little chart in here, which was like everything. But it's basically written in the order, or for the English anyway, the order in which you title a source. There's the title, the author, the date, the publisher, and the location. And so they have a graph here, like if it's a book, a letter, an email, certificate, newspaper, census, a website, a web forum, a family tree, if it was verbal, if it was an oral interview, and photos and videos. And it tells you what to put underneath, what information you need for the title, what information you need for the author or the people listed. When was the interviews done? What year was it published? The publisher or the recipient's names, and that sort of thing in there. So that was kind of cool, because it went through how to do that, and even talked about copyright. Now, this was interesting, because if you turn around and decide to write your family story, and you're quoting all these different sources and stuff, which you should be doing anyway. If you're writing, what was interesting is that it said here, the obvious statement is that if they were my ancestors, whether it is my parents or great or 5 times great-grandparents, then ownership is shared by all their descendants. So all the information about those people is shared by all those descendants. Now, if somebody decides to write up the story of the family, wants to write a family history book with the stories and their understanding of the events, they can claim copyright on that material, except dates and information that are in public domain cannot be copyrighted. Many of the documents that you access for a lot of information, such as dates, can be copyrighted to the government agency. So it comes in very tricky newspapers or thing, and where the information is published publicly. And then photographs can be owned by the person who took them. So there's a lot of legal hoo-haing around in there, and that, which I'm just wanting to, when we get into this class, when I get into my week-long class, we're going to be doing sources, because one of the things we're going to do is methods of reporting and all that. And she's going to be, and She's going to be talking about the legalities and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be interesting when we get to the copywriting of material, of what we can and cannot do, what we can claim under copyright, what we can't claim under copyright, and that sort of stuff too. So I was interested when I was reading through this and learning more about it. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting because, we're going to be taught by a lawyer who knows these laws in and out, backwards and frontwards and sideways and everything else. So it's going to be interesting to see how the copyright laws come into that. Also, too, personal information. So if people are dead, that's known information. It's out there. It's on the tree. If people are living, they may not want their information out there due to identity thefts. They don't want people knowing how old they are. And on all of my trees, whenever I do my trees, I lock it down tight. Like my trees are all private. And I check the box that if there's anybody living, it is to show as private, and it does it. It may show the outline for a female, it may show the outline for a male, but it will put private. And that's all anybody can see. If they search for the trees and the trees come up, that's all they see is anybody who is living is private. And it's got private, 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 private for the parents, and then private, 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 private for the kids. So that they can't read any of the information for those that are living. They can see just the little thumb cheapers. The thumbnail. They can see the thumbnail that will have their name and will have year of birth and year of death. They can see that for those that are dead, but for living, it'll just have private. It'll have private, and then where the dates are, it has living. That's it. So I always put that down tight because I don't know if people want their information out there or not. I don't want that information out there for my people, for my family. So I just do that across the board for any tree that I am working on. Even for clients, their trees are put in there and they're locked down tight. But as soon as they give me an email that I can then attach to that, they then have editing rights to that tree. They then get given the tree with all editing rights that they can go in and have a look. And when you've got editing rights, you get to see all the living people. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It really is. What other things did we have in here? Oh, we did case studies and lots of good stuff. And then they talked about researching the tree. And even put in here like a questionnaire, like, is there a specific person you want to research? Because when you're researching genealogy, you come up with a question. Is John Smith the father of Anne Smith, who was born this date, died this date, and lived in this town and got married to this person? And so everything you do when you're researching Anne Smith is to find out is to prove that John Smith is or is not the father of Anne, which, last name Smith, first name John, very, very common. And so it's looking at that question, and everything you do in research is to prove or disprove that John Smith is or is not the father of Anne. So, is there a specific person you want to research? Who are they? How are they related? What is the relationship you're trying to prove? What do you want to prove about them? And who will be the starting point of your research? And usually it's yourself, or it could be their children are wanting, their children or their grandchildren want to find out more information about the grandfather or the great-grandfather. Do you want to know about your ancestors and how many generations? I put mine down as far back as I can go. And I'm going wide and I'm going deep upwards and well into that tree. Climbing the tree, and this tree goes very wide as well. But then that's just me for my personal interest. If I'm working with a client, it is what's the question that you want answered? Well, we're not sure who the great grandfather is. Who my grandfather's father is. We're not sure, so we want to find out who it is. We think it's this person here, but we don't know. So we've got a starting place, and we start with the information. What information do you already have that you can prove? Like, do you have certificates, death certificates? And then, and today on the module, I found out interesting things about. I was sort of like, ooh, I am so annoyed with ancestors and stuff, because they would cheat on the records. So, hang on. I must be getting time to walk the dog. So parish registers in England go back as far as 1538. And that was when Thomas Cromwell ordered all churches to maintain records of baptisms, marriages, and burials within the area of their jurisdiction. They were also, and then in 1598, the parish clerks were ordered to forward the transcripts to the registers every year to their local bishop. And this continued until 1837 when the civil registration came into being. That's just in the UK. Oh, sorry, in England. And so, but with the baptism records, you don't have birth dates on them. You just have when they were baptized. So you don't know how old they were when they were baptized. On some parish records, they may have written in the margin when that person was born. They may have written their birth date in there. I know with my third great-grandfather, when I'm looking at his baptismal record, it has his birth date listed in there and his half-brothers listed in there, which is directly underneath, which is how we found out what happened in that family. So it's, and back then it was just the name of the child, the baptismal date, and the father's name. That was about it. But what's interesting is that the baptismal records, they said, are usually given the father's surname for legitimate children, but if they were illegitimate children, they got the mother's surname, and somewhere in there they may have put a mark in there to indicate that this was an illegitimate child. Yes. So the original basic early baptismal records was the child's name, the father's name, the church or parish where they were baptized, and the date of the baptism. That was it. Later on, they got an entry number for an index. They got a date when baptized, the child's name, the parents' names, their abode or address, and the quality, trade, or profession of the father, and by whom the ceremony was performed. And in 1837, birth certificates were introduced into England. And a full birth certificate will give you the date of birth, the place of birth, the full name of the child, the sex of the child, the informant's name, address, and relationship to the child, the maiden surname of the mother, and the full name and occupation of the father if married to the mother. Now, on some birth certificates, it will have the father as the informant. And because they were not married, he could not be named as the father on the birth certificate because they weren't married, but he was the informant of it. So his relationship to the child was father. And then after 1875, the father of an illegitimate child can only be named on the birth certificate with his consent. So this is back in those times where it was sort of like if they wanted to acknowledge that they had an heir, they would then put their name on the birth certificate. But the mother would have to get permission from the father to put his name on there if they were not married, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then there was no times list on there unless it was a multiple birth. They then put the times on there so you knew which order the multiple births happened. And then they brought in this thing that you then had so many days after the birth of the child to register the birth of the child. And if you didn't, you got fined for it. So there are now cases out there where there are a lot of birth certificates out there with the incorrect birth date on there because the parents lied about the birth date of their child to avoid being fined. And the person who wrote up this book says, my own mother-in-law has 2 birthdays. The first is in March, which is when she was actually born. The second is 8 months later in November, when her parents had time to go to the registry office in the closest city. The November date is on her birth certificate, passport, and therefore all other official documents. So she was actually 8 months old when her birth was registered. And they were way outside it. Had they put down March, they would have been fined for the fact that it's now 8 months later and you're only just registering your March birth. So they lied about the birth date in order to avoid paying a fine. And some of them you could just see it's just days difference. This was months difference. And then of course names can get screwed up and everything else depending on who is saying what the name is and what the person who is recording hears and how they think it is spelt. So you have a lot of different stuff that comes up in birth certificates because of that. And if there's a mistake on the birth certificate and they don't fix it, it gets carried through on all other documents. And then they talked about marriages during the 17th and 18th centuries, which present problems for the researchers because they had to have bans read and licenses obtained before, and they said it could be expensive, lengthy, and problematic. And so that's when they had elopements, they had bigamy and fly-by-night marriages, and creating lots of little trails for people to follow and try to put the pieces together as well. So you had a lot of places where if you're getting married here in your local parish, this is what you have to go through in order to be married, which is usually the banns, followed by and once the banns are done, then they can get the license and then they can get married. So some records you'll find the banns, but is it the first, second, or third? Some of them, most of them were 3. Is it the first, second, or third banns? So they got married sometime in this time period, if you can find all 3 banns, and then you might find that the license was issued and then the date of the marriage. In an ideal situation, that doesn't always happen. So when we're noting the marriage on the marriage thing, I put in the notes that we haven't found the marriage date. We just have the date that this ban was, and it's BANN, was read in church, because they get read in church over a certain number of weeks, and they have to be read like 3 times over a certain number of weeks. And then if anybody opposes the marriage, they have time to come forward and say, yeah, no, that ain't going to happen, and give their reason as to why. But yeah, there was a lot of clandestine marriages that took place in that time because people would run away to a different parish to avoid having to do the banns, because it was an expensive process to go through. So there's all sorts of stories that can come up on that as well. And then we've learned about death certificates and that also too. So, which will include the age, the occupation, location, date, and cause of death for the person. Under occupation for females, if they were married, it would quite often have her occupation be listed as the wife of, and then her husband's name. And in today's language, that was a stay-at-home mum, if you just wanted to know. That's how they did it back then. Sometimes they will show the woman's, if it's a woman who's passed away, sometimes on the death certificate, they will put her maiden name. And in some countries, the parents are also listed. When it is done, it is worth remembering that often the child of the deceased who is providing the information may have never met their grandparents, and they could be providing poor, recollected information told to them by their now deceased parent. And that happens still to this day. I remember when I went in to do Brad's death certificate and everything, I had to take his passport in. They then took it back to where his body was, so they could match up the photographs and determine that, yes, this is definitely Brad. They looked at his photo. They used his passport photograph to identify his body that way. Even though I had already given the information, that was their legal way of testing it. Then they started asking me the questions of when was he born, where was he born, what was his occupation. They already had the cause of death, so didn't have to do that one. Who was I, and who was I as the informant? When did we get married? How many marriages he had, how many children he had. There was also, we had to put his parents' names on there and their birth dates and death dates if they had already passed. What else was there? I think that was it. And then I had to sign it and print out my name and put how I was related to the person who had deceased, even though they already had that information up further. So there's a lot of detail going in there. And sometimes there are no family members around to provide that information. So it could be a coworker, a boss, it could be the next door neighbor, it could be a distant relative, it could be a cousin, it could be an aunt or an uncle. So sometimes the information there can get a little murky, because you're relying on people's memories as to what they knew about this person. And what is interesting, the next chapter I'm going to be doing is census. The next module is census. And I already know in censuses, especially here in the US, I will find out on the UK when I start reading that module, is that anybody could provide the information about the family in that dwelling. So it could be the next door neighbor who's turning and says, oh yeah, their names are blah, 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 blah. And, he would be about 45 Yeah, he's just a year or two older than me. And she's younger than me. I think she's only a year younger than me. And and give information at in the end they've got 4 kids, and they actually have 3, but the 4th one is a friend who's always over at their place. And the neighbor doesn't realize that that's not their child. It's, it could be a cousin. It could be a friend from somewhere else. But that still happens to this day, where that information is given that way, because especially if they have the enumerators going knocking on doors, if the people aren't home, it's quite often the next door neighbor who provides information if they can. So, oh yeah, they've got 5 kids. I think their names are, and they'll rattle off 5 different names. And how old are the kids? How old are the kids? Oh, well, their oldest one is the same age as mine, so that's like 17. Their second one is a year younger than mine, so that one will be 14. And then we've got this one here. They're the same age, so they're 10. And they could be completely out of whack. But the census is there. They're taking this information, and in some census reports, it will say who provided the information on some of them, but most of them it doesn't. So I'm going to be interested looking at the English census. I have seen English census reports because I have researched them for my own family and ancestors, but it'll be interesting to learn how they differ from the American census reports as well. So anyway, I'm out of here. My puppy is waiting very patiently for her walk. So go out, have a super fantastic sparkling day. I had a question for you guys today. What question did I give you guys today? Oh yeah, what new things are you learning? Let us know in the comments below what new things you're learning. And also to remember, if you want to be on Nicole's webinar on Tuesday, the 18th of July, go to episode number 1440, and the link for it is right there near the top of the description. And just click on that and register, and it's free. You'll be interested. It'd be interesting to find out what's in your blood. What can your blood tell you? So it was interesting. If you tuned in last night, you would have learned some things that your blood work can tell straight off, especially for somebody who's been trained to read it. And yeah, that was just fascinating. That with what they can pick up. So now I'm trying to figure out. I won't have time to do blood work before next week. So I might have to go back to a report from 2019 because it's the last time I had any blood work done. And see if I can pull that up. But I now need to request a password because I don't remember my login information. Anyway, I'm out of here. Go have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, oh, hang on. Wait up. I think I have something going on today. Yeah, no, tomorrow night's call will be at 7 p.m. Pacific time because I have a thing that I'm attending that goes till like 6:30. So I'm going to give them a little leeway on that one. So tomorrow evening we'll be online at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, konera.